The place I come from is famous for timber. Ishwaran would begin. There is a richly wooded forest all around. The logs are hauled on to the lorries by elephants. They are huge, well fed beasts. Big elephants, enormous elephants, the giant ones. When they turn wild, even the most experienced Mahavat is not able to control them. Who is Mahavat? The one who controls elephant. After this prologue, Ishwaran would launch into an elaborate anecdote involving an elephant. Means his stories would never end. He was such a great storyteller. One day a tusker escaped from the timber yard and began to roam about, tusker elephant, stamping on bushes, tearing up wild creepers and breaking branches at will. You know, sir, how an elephant behaves when it goes mad. Ishwaran would get so caught up in the excitement of his own story that he would get up from the floor and jump about, stamping his feet in emulation of mad elephant. Means he started copying like mad elephant, like showing how elephants behave when they get mad. The elephant reached the outskirts of our town, breaking the fences down like matchsticks. He would continue. It came into the main road and smashed all the stalls selling fruits, mud pots, and clothes. People ran helter-skelter here and there in panic. The beast grunted and wandered about. All the boys ran into the classroom. The elephant now entered school ground where children were playing, breaking through the brick wall. All the boys ran into the classrooms and pulling out the football goal post, tearing down volleyball net, everything, destroying, kicking and flattening the drum kept for water and uprooting terrace of the school building, so destructive. From there they helplessly watched the depredations of the elephant. There was not a soul below on the ground. The streets were empty as if inhabitants of entire town had suddenly disappeared. Everybody has gone inside. How menacing and destructive. I was studying in the junior class at that time and I was watching the whole drama from the rooftop. I do not know what came over me suddenly. I grabbed a cane from the hands of one of the teachers and ran down the stairs and into the open. I took that sugar cane from one of the teachers and went down. The elephant grunted and menacingly, destructively swung a branch of a tree which it held in its trunk. It stamped its feet, kicking up a lot of mud and dust. It looked so frightening, but I moved slowly towards it, stick in the hand. People were watching the scene hypnotized from nearby housetops, and they were watching without an eye diverted in any direction. The elephant looked at me red-eyed in anger, ready to rush towards me. It lifted its trunk and trumpeted loudly. At that moment, I moved forward and mustering all my force, gathered all my force, wagged its third toenail on the quick. Wagged means hit. The beast looked stunned for a moment. He was surprised. What happened? Then it shivered from head to foot and collapsed and broken and fell down. At this point, Ishwaran would leave the story unfinished. You see, great storytellers, they leave you gasped. They leave you surprised and get up mumbling. Started speaking something in slow tone. I'll be back after lighting the gas and warming up the dinner. Mahendra, who had been listening with rapt attention, careful attention, would be left hanging. Oh, what happened to him? First he created interest in the story and now he's saying he's going to warm the dinner. Oh God. When he returned, Ishwaran would not pick up the thread of the story right away. Mahendra would have to remind him that the conclusion was pending. Well, a veterinary doctor was summoned to revive the animal. He recollected the story to Mahendra and told a vet was called to treat the animal. Ishwaran would shrug casually. 2 days later, it was led away by its mahavar to the jungle. Means the animal was taken to the jungle by his mahavat. Well, how did you manage to do it, Ishwaran? How did you bring down the beast? How did you bring down the animal? It has something to do with the Japanese art. I think so. Karate or Jiu-Jitsu is called. I read about it somewhere. And it temporarily paralyzes the nervous system, you see. Not a day passed without Ishwaran recounting some story packed with adventure. He used to narrate adventurous stories, horror stories, and suspenseful. Whether the story was credible or not, credible means real or not, Mahendra enjoyed listening to it because of the imitable way in which it was told. He used to copy, he used to imitate the character. Ishwaran seemed to more than make up for the absence of TV in Mahendra's living quarters. There was no TV in their quarters, so the cook Ishwaran completed its space. And Mahendra never felt bored. One morning, when Mahendra was having breakfast, Ishwaran asked, "Can I make something special for dinner tonight, sir? After all, today is an auspicious day, a fortunate day. After all, today is an auspicious day. According to tradition, we prepare various delicacies, various delicious dishes to feed the spirits of our ancestors today, sir." That night, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and complimented Ishwaran on his culinary skills. Culinary means cooking skills. He seemed very pleased but unexpectedly launched into most garish account involving the supernatural. Some query topic and something that is related to ghosts and spirits. How many of you feel good about ghost stories? How many of you love reading ghost stories or listening to them? Well, you know, sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground, he started. Mahendra was jerked out of the pleasant reverie he had drifted into after satisfying meal. Now, after a good meal, he was taken to a suspicious story that is regarding ghosts. Mahendra immediately jerked out, was shocked to know. "I knew on the first day itself when I saw a human skull lying on the path. You see, I saw a skull. Even now I come across number of skulls and bones," he continued. Now Mahendra was frightened. Ishwaran went on to narrate how he sometimes saw ghosts at night. "I'm not easily frightened by these things, sir. I'm a brave fellow. But one horrible ghost of a woman which appears off and on at midnight during the full moon. It's an ugly creature with matted hair and shriveled face, like a skeleton holding a fetus in its arm." Fetus means unborn baby. Yes. Mahendra shivered at the description and interrupted rather sharply. "You are crazy, Ishwaran. There are no such things as ghosts or spirits. It is all a figment of your imagination. It is just your imagination. Stop talking about these things. It is all figment of your imagination. Get your digestive system examined and maybe your head as well. You need to clear your brain. You're talking nonsense. You crazy guy." He left the room and retired for the night. Retired means slept, expecting Ishwaran to sulk for a couple of days. He was expecting that Ishwaran should be quiet about this ghost story. It's quite terrifying. But the next morning he was surprised to find the cook as cheerful and talkative as ever. From that day on, Mahendra, for all his brave talk, went to bed with certain unease. Every night he peered into the darkness. He used to peep into the darkness outside through the window next to his bed, trying to make sure that there are no movements. There was no movement of dark shapes in the vicinity. Vicinity means neighborhood. He used to check outside if anybody was coming towards him, but he could only see a sea of darkness with the twinkling lights of the factory miles away. He had always liked to admire the milk white landscape on the full moon nights. He used to appreciate that environment. Everything was so glittery on that full moon night, milky white. But after hearing Ishwaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window. He was terrified altogether when the moon was full. One night, Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by low moan close to the window. Low crying sound. At first he put it down to a cat prowling around for mice. He thought that a cat must be there searching for the mice. But the sound was too guttural for a cat. But that couldn't be the sound of cat. He resisted the curiosity to look out lest he should behold a sight which would stop his heart. He stopped himself from looking outside because he knew that if he would see something terrifying outside, it would stop his heartbeat. But the wailing became louder and less feline. But the crying sound became louder and louder and less feline. Feline means related to cats. He couldn't resist the temptation anymore. Now he couldn't stop himself. Lowering himself to the level of windowsill, he looked out at the white sheet of moonlight outside. There, not too far away, was a dark, cloudy form clutching a bundle. Mahendra broke into cold sweat. Now he was perspiring and fell back on the pillow. He was terrified, actually frightened, panting, breathing heavily. Oh man, as he gradually recovered from the ghastly experience, he began to reason with himself. He started questioning himself and finally concluded that it must have been some sort of auto-suggestion, some sort of just imagination, some trick that his subconscious had played on him. He thought that it must be his figment of imagination. They can never be ghosts. By the time he had got up in the morning, had a bath and come out to have his breakfast, the horror of previous night had faded from his memory. Faded means disappeared. Ishwaran greeted him at the door with his lunch packet and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Ishwaran grinned. He laughed and said, "Sir, you remember the other day when I was telling you about the female ghost with the fetus in its arms? You were so angry with me for imagining things. Well, you saw herself last night. Yeah? I came running hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room. Somebody was crying." A chill went down Mahendra's spine and he was extremely petrified. He didn't wait for Ishwaran to complete his sentence even. He hurried away to his office, immediately ran away and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. And he wanted to leave the place because he was too much terrified. Story ends. You believe in supernatural things? Well, think about it. In case you like the story, hit the like icon.